Thank you very much. So we will move forward this afternoon. The next committee before us is Committee of the Whole. And I just wanted to make note that we do have, thought we had all council members present, but I just want to double check. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. Okay, so we have the full council with us this afternoon and a couple of items before us. So the first of which is Agenda Bill 23277. This is a discussion of returning to council chambers. So the City Council asked for discussion of returning to in-person City Council meetings, and staff will discuss the implications of a return to in-person meetings, including a discussion of existing emergency orders, boards and commission meetings, and the current community health situation. The decision to return to in-person meetings is the City Council's to make. And so this afternoon, we will give that consideration. And first, I was going to turn to Deputy Administrator Brian Heinrich. I don't know if Mayor Fleetwood had anything to add in advance. No.
I don't think so. The only thing that I would underscore that was expressed in the staff memo to you all for this discussion was simply relating to emergency orders. And as you can see, I've announced that I'm going to be lifting the emergency proclamation that I issued. Brian, help me out. I think it was March 13th, 2020. And our intention is, our intention is to line that up with the effective date, same as the governor's October 31st. So with the exception of that, I'll just hand it over to Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, as the mayor said, that's probably the big news from this particular staff memo. Just want to hit a couple of things as you consider returning to council chambers for council meetings. The current COVID-19 levels in Whatcom County are low. The City Council chamber capacity, this has come up, I think, in some discussions previously. It currently is at 153. We do not recommend reducing that capacity, and the airflow HVAC system meets current CDC recommendations for indoor air quality. In addition, vaccination status for city staff as well as volunteers, I might add that the memo doesn't articulate that, but it is required for city staff as well as city volunteers. That's still in place, will remain in place, and masks are optional. I would just add that the CDC also encourages staying up to date with vaccinations. I think another fairly significant change that we tried to capture here is as it relates to the Open Public Meetings Act. And if you had a chance to read a memo, hopefully that made sense. We pulled from a couple of different sources to help inform how that guidance was given. But basically, you can continue to meet remotely. However, after the expiration of both the statewide and the local emergency order, there must be a physical location so that the public can attend in person. But any or all members of the governing body, in this case, the City Council, can choose to still attend in person. And that was a recent change at the legislature made that was effective. You'll see Part B there of that memo. I think that's 5B. Requires in-person meetings subject to some of those conditions that are laid out there, notably a local emergency ordinance. And then city boards and commissions, we're going to spend the bulk of October when we speak with those boards and commissions, getting a sense of their attendance in person beginning in November. Our preference is to have those in person, but we do have some time to discuss and understand the staff implications and potentially the technology and facility implications. So finally, you'll see there, number 6, the recommendation. Staff are recommending that the City Council return as soon as your October 3rd meeting, which is obviously next Monday. But in any event, in-person meetings will, at a physical location, will have to occur by the November 7th meeting. So we look forward to your discussion, and we can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heinrich. So one of the just logistical questions I had was sort of what you highlighted. So that was in 5B, subsection 2. where it's talking about, right, the encouragement, but it's not required for us to provide the option for a remote meeting or remote attendance. However, if we're allowing verbal public comment during a regular meeting, then that remote option must be available. And so one of the things I was thinking about is in returning to chambers on Monday, October 3rd, is that I believe there are a couple of public hearings scheduled that day, which obviously would have been publicized previously as being held remotely. And so if we return to chambers, obviously then there would be an option for people to attend in person, but we would still be providing that remote option. So I'm under the understanding that even a return on Monday to chambers would not put us in any parallel or conflict with respect to what's already been posted for public hearings that are upcoming. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think you are correct. I'll ask if James Erb with the legal department would like to weigh in, but I believe we are covered in that respect. Recall that chambers right now is situated to accommodate a hybrid meeting, so it shouldn't be an issue both to allow for public hearing comments as well as in-person public hearing comments.
Correct. Okay. Mr. Erb, did you have anything to add?
I don't. I think Mr. Heinrich answered the question that was presented, and chambers are prepared for the hybrid meeting next Monday if council returns in person next Monday.
Okay. I just know previously the issue had been raised by some department heads, particularly in planning, I believe, when notice needs to be given, right, sort of in advance about whether something's going to be done remotely or in person. And so I just wanted to be clear that any notice that was previously provided about something being held remotely could still go forward at this time, because we'd be able to provide both in-person or remote attendance options. So, okay. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. And I don't necessarily expect you to have all this information right now, but what would be very useful, at least for me, is a little bit of a kind of a procedural document that once we go back to in person, and I plan on attending in person, but if I wake up in the morning and I'm sick and I am still in enough condition that I can remote in, or perhaps I know 2 weeks in advance I need to take care of grandchildren. My daughter recently gave birth, so that part's done, but how much time allowance do we really need for staff? And then who do we contact to let them know that we plan on remoting in? So some of that information so that we know and have a guideline on how to plug in depending on our decision and situation would be very useful. I assume I just don't call Council President Stone a half hour before the meeting to say I'm home. That's probably not the best way to start off a morning meeting.
Mr. Erb?
Yes, thank you, Council President Stone. So the legislature just updated the OPMA, as you're all aware, and as the memo states, to allow for remote participation by any or all council members at a meeting, even with a physical location. However, I want to point out that the council has also adopted its own policies and procedures that you recently adopted earlier this year, and those are more restrictive than what state law allows in some respects. So what they say is that remote participation should be limited and that it is allowed at the discretion of the council president. So that, unless the council wants to take those policies and procedures up and amend them, that is currently what the council's adopted policies are. And that's not a staff policy, that's just council's policy.
And I might add that I believe in the near term, depending on what council decides, the council invitation that includes the Zoom link will continue to be sent even in the event of in-person attendance for those folks that will remote in, because we might have situations where staff need to remote in as well. So I don't think that part will change. And I would echo what James said with respect to the council's own procedures in terms of moving forward.
And certainly we could address, those procedures and outline things more clearly as a council. I think at this time, the preference would be, if we're returning to in person, that everyone council staff included, right? That the expectation is that everyone would be in attendance in person. However, we obviously have the technology to support a remote option. So I would think that the discretion that's currently been in place where council members, contact at this time, me serving as council president, again, in connection even with an absence or things of that sort. I think that could proceed as it's been, unless there were concerns about sort of abusive discretion or in needing to put some clearer guidelines in place. So that can certainly be fine, more formalized. Councilmember Hamel?
Thanks, Council President Stone. So after looking at all of you in these little boxes for the last 2.5 years, I move that we resume in-person meetings in council chambers for our October 3rd, 2022 meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Lillquist. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
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 Any opposed? Or abstentions? Okay, that passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heinrich. Okay, so with that, we will move to the next item on our agenda, which is Agenda Bill 23182. This is Post Point Resource Recovery Project discussion. So on August 29th, Mayor Fleetwood announced his intention to stop further development of the Post Point Resource Recovery Project. On September 12th, the Public Works Committee received a briefing, and the council referred the discussion to the Committee of the Whole for today, being September 26th. And so for this item, I'm going to first turn to Mayor Fleetwood.
Thank you, Council President Stone. Well, not a lot to say further to what is already expressed in the packet and what's been said thus far. Of course, I made that announcement on August 29th. I know we had a work session on the topic where questions were answered on the 12th. And we're back here today to answer some specific questions that I know a couple of you had asked. I do want to say, however, that I think it's important that there be an expression from the council indicating whether or not you support this general direction. I was prepared to propose such a motion that you could consider, but I see that there was a memo put forward by Councilmember Lillquist that very clearly and I think appropriately sort of lays out the motions that could be made. And I assume you'll be speaking to that, Councilmember Lillquist, shortly. I do want to emphasize that aside from stopping the digestion improvements that we've been working towards for some time, I had expressed the need to make maintenance commitments to our existing incinerators and other aspects of Post Point facility. I think that may have been interpreted that therefore we were proposing that we close the door to longer term consideration of future needs around other possibilities that could include gasification or pyrolysis, for example. And I just want to underscore that's not the case. I am proposing that digestion come to an end for all the reasons that have been articulated multiple times and are laid out in the memo. We are proposing using existing funds that we possess to engage in maintenance improvements to the incinerators, but nothing in this effort or proposal is forestalling or stopping any future discussions around long-term needs at Post Point. We remain open to that. Indeed, I think we regard it as a necessity to address capacity issues in the long term. So with that, I will hand it back to you, Council President Stone.
Thank you very much, Mayor Fleetwood. So at this time, I was going to turn to Director Johnston to see if you have any opening remarks or things to add before we turn to questions.
Not specifically, but I do have maybe a list of 5 or 6 questions that came out of the last meeting that maybe we can go through and talk about that might lead to more questions, and certainly would welcome that opportunity. So let's start first with kind of one of the big questions was, In the past, on the digester project, we've talked about the need to do something and have sometimes used the term the system is failing. And that is a correct statement. So the obvious question that was raised before, and one might ask, is, well, how can we now say we're going to maintain a system that was failing? And then by the next question that comes out of that, so maybe a two-part question, is how long will the repairs and maintenance that we're talking about last for? So let's put those into kind of the same category of question. With the intent to replace in its entirety the solids handling system, and I use that term to mean everything associated with solids. We abbreviate that conversation to be digesters or incinerators, but it is one portion of the larger conversation. We talked about that in terms of funding, the $220 million project, a portion was for digesters. With the incineration process, as we have talked about replacing that process with a new process, we have made conscious decisions to use a certain maintenance regimen for that system. And in some cases have said, we're going to allow systems to, or parts or pieces to run to failure. So a run to failure model of maintenance with the expectation that we would replace it. One way to think about that, using my Suburban again, I'm not going to put brand new tires on a Suburban I'm going to trade in or buy a new truck for. Right? That's just not how we would maintain our personal vehicles. If we're going to buy a new one, we would not do that same level of maintenance. Now that we have made the decision to stop the program to replace the system, we now need to move from a run to failure mode of maintenance, move past and through the deferred maintenance, so catch up on the deferred maintenance, and move into a model that gets to essential and preventative maintenance, which is how we run most of our utility systems. We run it under that essential preventative maintenance model to replace things before they fail. So both are correct statements. We have been in the run to failure mode. The system is failing, we need to do something. And now that we have changed that approach, we now need to bring it back up to standard, play catch up on the deferred maintenance, and move into a preventative and essential maintenance mode for the system in its entirety. For some components that have been difficult to maintain, that we were letting to go to the point of failure, we will now replace the system in its entirety, which allows us to continue in that preventative maintenance mode, which then leads to how long will those systems run for? And the target in that maintenance model is a 15 to 20 year life before major rehabilitation needs to occur. So it is correct that we were looking in that run to failure mode. We are now pivoting towards the accelerate the maintenance, get us back into the mode of preventative maintenance like we do for systems that we expect to last for a very long time. The reliability will be to the same standard we expect of all our systems, and the projected lifespan of the incinerators and the systems that are part of the solids handling system would be that 15 to 20 year life. Now, at the end of that 20-year life, in a typical maintenance curve, we can still continue to invest in those systems as long as we're able and need to do so. That leads to another question about the contaminants of emerging concern and pollutants that are coming through the emissions. As we are using incineration process, there's a responsibility to make sure that we're compliant with our regulations under the Clean Air Act. And we will have additional requirements that will be put onto the city to maintain and to continue to use as we invest in maintaining these systems to meet new and future standards that will come forward. We are compliant with current standards. We meet those permit conditions. We are operating a legally and permitted incineration system and will continue to do so. The challenges will, in meeting our EPA and Northwest Clean Air requirements, will not become easier. So as we look to the future, those will become more stringent, but we are compliant with the current requirements, and we expect to do so in the future. We've set aside funding in the tables that we've shared that are in the packet that we presume at this point will be sufficient to meet those requirements. One of the question comes up is, how do we deal with contaminants of emerging concern? And particularly in the last couple of months, we have had a great deal of focus on perfluorinated compounds and how will incinerators approach that particular dilemma. We continue to maintain that the best way to deal with that particular type of compound, the PFAs and the so-called Gen X compounds, is to eliminate them from the source and that our efforts as a city are best placed in supporting efforts at the state and federal level to eliminate them from the source. The incinerators will do what they continue to do today. There is still continue to matter a great deal of research about how incineration will deal with that one narrow type of contaminant of concern, as well as other contaminants of concern that we deal with the wastewater treatment system. But the best way to deal with those types of components is to eliminate them from the source, and we will continue to do what we do moving forward. The other question that comes up about the incinerators is future capacity, and Mayor Fleetwood mentioned that a little bit. So what maintaining the current incineration system, the solids handling system, does is keep us on our current track. What it does not anticipate is growth in the system over some years. And there's a need to address that question. As we looked at the resource recovery project, that was addressing replacing existing systems, as well as planning for many, many, many years of growth in the system over time. We can point to that being the number of digester tanks that were on the resource recovery. Recall that we initially planned for 4 digester tanks, but planning space for 6, planning for future growth. We will need to spend some time in 23 and 24 to plan for future growth of the system. And as part of that process, would envision considering new and emerging technologies that might include pyrolysis or gasification or other types of technologies that might become available to deal with our solids. And at some point in time, if those technologies become viable and usable and are commonly used in the industry, we look forward to potentially, in some point in the future, replacing the incinerators with that type of technology. There's a lot of work going on in the world of that particular emerging technologies. We are expecting that as we move forward the next several years to take advantage of that and look at various options for piloting out smaller scale versions of the processes at Post Point. So as we look to rehabilitate, replace, or indeed change some things at Post Point, can we do it in a way that allows us to easily and conveniently, at relatively low impact, try some of these newer technologies out without the risk that would be faced of going 100% in on new technology that is not really proven within the industry quite yet. So we're excited about that possibility moving forward. I think that covers all 5 of the basic questions. We talked about the lifespan, how do we fix what we have? We talked about potential changes with emerging concerns, contaminants of emerging concerns and PFAS in particular, emissions, and then future capacity. I will share that we are in the process now of working on 5 basic things. Now that we have stopped administrative actions on the digester project, the first is an engineering study as to which types of maintenance activities need to be done first over the next couple of years. We know of certainty that the very first thing that needs to be done is the storage tank needs to be replaced. That's not something we can maintain. We do need to replace that storage tank. So that's first on our list to do. Then close second is we need to do an engineering study as to which project comes in the priority list. We'll be working on that very, very soon. Number 2 and number 3 are closely tied together. One is replacement of the control systems. These are programmable logic controllers and SCADA systems and computers that run that solid system in its entirety. We have existing contracts to do with that type of work on the liquid side of the plant. We excluded the solid side is because we knew we were replacing it. Now that we're pivoting, we need to focus on the control side of things. Similarly, we need to focus on the emissions controls. We expect that we'll need to bring a consultant on board to help us identify what needs to be done and when. We expect to be starting that work in 2023. We need to continue our efforts to plan for nutrient removal. We continue to need to do studies and engineering consulting on managing our nutrients in our existing system in terms of optimizing how our system removes nutrients. And we need to be planning for a future project that would remove nutrients as part of a side stream system. However, with the digesters being changed to the incineration, that impact will be lower and we have more flexibility and time. With the digester project, the resource recovery project, the need for that side stream physical infrastructure came due on 2027. Now that we are continuing with the maintenance of the incinerators, that will be pushed off to some future year, but not too far from the distance. So we need to continue on that. And then the last one is we anticipate in 2023 to start the process for future capacity planning. And that is not only the type of technology, but the volume and the space needs that we would need to consider for where that facility and what type of facility and what that would envision, where that would go. We would expect that that type of planning, that fifth level of study, would take a couple of period of time, at least 2 years to go through that process, as we've seen in the past. But those are the 5 actions that will be taken in terms of engineering and construction work over the next year or so. And the mayor's budget proposal will reflect those types of activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Johnston. I know that the mayor made reference to correspondence sent out from Councilmember Lillquist, and I just wanted to make sure other council members had seen that correspondence. It arrived in the email at 12:57 p.m. today, so right before we started. So in case you hadn't seen that, that is in the email, but I believe that we will go over the sort of content of that during the meeting today. So I wanted to turn to council at this time for any additional questions or comments or proposed motions. Councilmember Lillquist.
Well, I mean, to start off with, I think we should acknowledge that this would be a significant change in direction. But, as facts emerge and as the facts as we understand them change, well, then our plans should change accordingly. And this is one of those moments. So I think we just ought to simply acknowledge the magnitude of the change in direction, but also the utter reasonableness of changing our direction when it makes sense to do so. So as much as this was a surprise to me when the mayor brought it forward not too long ago, I'm prepared to follow his lead. Part of that is because I was growing increasingly uncomfortable, not just over the last few months, but over the last few years with the estimated costs. And, it's clear that that same concern has been grown in many of your minds and was one of the lead things in the mayor's decision. So I am prepared to, at some point, to present 3 motions. I think probably the best way to go is I'll present them this afternoon and we can vote on them this evening. I don't want to rush anything forward. As Hannah indicated, I wrote these up over lunch hour and sent them out, right before the meeting. So I know you haven't seen them. I can certainly present them in writing here on the screen whenever you would like me to do so. But I'm not gonna, I think it'd be really good if we were to sit on the motions for this afternoon. And then I will probably be asking for a vote this evening, depending how the conversation goes now.
Well, Councilmember Lillquist, I guess I would propose that you share the motions either by stating them or sharing them, as you said, in written form, so that the full council knows what motions would be on the table for consideration. Councilmember Martins?
I was just getting my hand up to be in line, but I can wait until this discussion is over.
Councilmember Hamel?
Yeah, I don't understand the point of waiting until this evening. We don't wait to discuss motions in the afternoon on anything else. I mean, I had the opportunity to read these, and I think that there's enough content here that we should be discussing this in full, and I don't have any problem waiting, but I think we should make the motions to this afternoon.
Councilmember Lillquist, with that, do you want to move forward with the first?
Sure, I
motion?
can do that. First of all, I'm trying to share my screen. I don't know if that's succeeding.
It is, we can see it.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. So here are the motions. I'll go through the 3 of them and I'll go back and I'll make the first motion. So the first one is basically what the mayor was talking about. It's a motion that we formally concur with the mayor's decision. Indicated the rationale basically are the 3 reasons, the general reasons the mayor has given. And then it acknowledges what Mr. Johnson just talked about, that going in this direction will require substantial tens of millions of dollars, if not maybe up to $100 million of investment over the next decade to keep those incinerators not just in the run to failure mode, but in the preventive maintenance mode. The second motion then sort of cleans up the work. If we're changing this direction, then we got to go back and look at the policies which were driving that direction. It has 2 parts. One is the general request the administration to look at all policies that may be affected and all revisions in For example, maybe our comprehensive sewer plan document has elements in there that need to be reviewed. But in particular, we know that the climate action plan significantly named the resource recovery as a climate action, and it was supported in there as one of the actions. And so the second motion says that one we know for sure should be brought forward to the appropriate committee, which should be led by Christina. And then the third motion, frankly, is kind of the most important to me, and that also was alluded to by Mr. Johnson. It's an indication that the council does indeed request the administration actively pursue and develop work plans to investigate future projects into alternative waste solid technologies and processes, including but not limited to pyrolysis and gasification. The idea is that, yes, we're going to have to continue with incineration, but that there are other possibilities out there. And given the longest view, we know that we will one day need to replace them or supplement them, and that we should start that work now. And I note in a comment there, that's pretty much what we already asked the administration to do. The kind of the standing direction is do biodigestion, but also work on alternative thermal technologies. Now it's continue incineration, but also work on alternative thermal technologies and whatever else may be available. So in a certain sense, the third motion, even though it's the most important, also is not a significant change. It does what Mr. Johnson said. It continues to look for newer and better technologies that are out there. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion. Is that okay, Hannah? I hereby move the City Council concurs with the mayor's decision to halt further work on biodigestion for waste solid handling at the Post Point sewage treatment plant.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Hamel. I'm going to stop share for just a moment to open it up for discussion. So again, the motion's been made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Hamel. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hamel.
Yeah, I just want to make a few points in terms of why I'm supporting this direction that CM Lillquist is moving us towards. I think we have three goals, three items that I think we need to adhere to. One is we need to continue to meet our climate goals, as we've outlined previously. The second is that we need to protect ratepayers from large increases as best we possibly can. I know that there will be increases. And the third thing is to meet our legal permit requirements. So as long as we're tracking on all three of those items, I'm fine with this direction.
Additional discussion?
May I comment?
Yes, Mayor Fleetwood.
Two of those three things that you mentioned, Councilmember Hamel, are directly consistent with the reason that I offered going forward. The one that you didn't mention, and I would just want to put this on the record, underscoring it, is the fact that we do know that there's going to be major obligations from the state coming down the road relating to nutrients that are also going to be enormously expensive. So we've got a major expense coming down the road in that regard. So I'm just adding to what Councilmember Hamel said. That's just one more reason.
Additional discussion from council? Okay, seeing none, the motion before us at this time is that the City Council concur with the mayor's decision to halt further work on biodigestion for waste solids handling at the Post Point sewage treatment plant. Again, there was a first by council. The motion was made by Councilmember Lillquist and seconded by Councilmember Hamel. All those in favor will say aye.
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 Any opposed? Or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0. Councilmember Lillquist.
Excuse me, I was trying to share my screen. Is it shared again?
It is.
Thank you. I would like to make a two-part motion. Part one of the motion is that I move the administration bring forward any policies that are previously adopted by the City Council that may need to be amended to align with this new direction relative to the resource recovery project. And in addition, I move that as they relate to the city's current climate action plan, relevant action plans and policies affected by the postponed decision be referred to the council's climate action committee for review and possible modification of the climate action plan, and if necessary, brought to the full council for consideration and possible adoption.
Second,
And I mispunctuated in there, but you can accept that in.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Anderson. Open up for discussion. Councilmember Hamel.
Just a brief comment. I think this is very well thought out. I really appreciate this, Michael. This the cleanup of this, making sure that everything is met and sewn up well. I think that it's very, very well thought out. And so thank you for doing this. And I support the motion.
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, the motion's been made by Councilmember Lillquist in two parts and seconded by Councilmember Anderson. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor will say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0. Councilmember Lillquist.
Okay, let me do the third one if there's no objections. I'm an old pro with this now. And
No, I'm just kidding. It worked.
okay, just when we're going back to in person. I would like to move now that the administration actively pursue and develop work plans investigating future projects into alternative waste solid technologies and processes, including but not limited to thermal processes such as pyrolysis and gasification, for supplementing and or replacing the current incineration equipment and processes.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Williams. Any discussion? Councilmember Lillquist.
So most community members probably don't know, but the city council has received a large number of emails, all pretty much identical on a particular topic. And they have to do with the concern that incineration really isn't the right way to go, and that these alternative thermal processes is the obvious way that we should be looking at. And this motion is directly responsive to that. I agree, we should be looking at them. We have been looking at them, and we should continue looking at them. The one part, and I know we'll be trying to respond to those emails after I formulate my thoughts some more, is that those emails indicated that the gasification and pyrolysis were proven technologies. And I think that's misleading. There are a very small number of pilot projects or projects that are using those technologies in the context of municipal waste solid treatment. If you look up gasification and pyrolysis, these are very well-known chemical processes, and there are examples of them that go back hundreds, if not thousands of years, and you probably even use them in your daily life because some cooking actually uses versions of pyrolysis to create those tasty flavors in your food. So the point is not gasification and pyrolysis. The point is the difficulty of applying that to tons and tons of mixed municipal waste every day. I'm sure we can solve that problem, but I don't want the public to think that that problem has been solved and it's off-the-shelf technology. And that's why this motion, I crafted the way I did. We really need to get involved right in there, seriously investigating them, potentially running pilot projects to do our part to move the technology forward if it really is a newer and better way of doing things. So I just wanted to comment to the people who sent in those letters and to the general public to understand in part where we're coming from on this, or where I'm coming from on this.
Councilmember Anderson.
thank you. And I just want to thank Councilmember Lillquist because it is a fine line you were able to thread as far as addressing what the community has sent to us, but also encouraging the pathway to perhaps be part of a pilot study, to be part of the research, to look for those types of partnerships. And a conversation I had last week with Director Johnson, he made it very clear that the industry is quickly changing. And so what kind of like what we're facing now, 10 years ago when we started this process, it really was at the time, the best direction to go. So we don't know over the next 2 to 3 years with this industry what the direction will be going. And with new technology and new research, I'm looking forward and hoping that the city will be doing some pilot projects and some research to be able to vet what's really going to be the best fit for Bellingham. So I appreciate the way you have crafted this, and look forward to seeing what the city staff brings to us in the near future.
Councilmember Hamel?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in here and just say that I agree with Councilmember Anderson and Lillquist. And I look at this as a bridging approach to trying to solve an issue that is at an enterprise scale, I guess I would characterize it as something that's municipal, that has to work every day and it can't fail. It has to be legal. It has to meet a number of climate action goals that this governing body has set, that the administration is in agreement with, and I think we're all on the same page with that. So for this to work, I think we need a little bit more time to do that. And I don't view this as like vacillating or flip-flopping or anything like that. I view it as a smart approach to spending our taxpayers' money wisely and doing it in a context that provides for a reasonable approach to our climate action goals. If you look at the footprint of the of Post Point, it's significant when it comes to how it affects climate, and so we have to do it the right way. And if we need a couple of years or a few years to buy time to do it properly, I'm all for it. So I think this is the right direction. I'd like to commend Councilmember Lillquist for what seemingly looks like a master's thesis done over a lunch. Well done, sir. And I think this is a good direction. I think it's concurrent with what we've all said, what we want in terms of how Bellingham will face its climate action goals.
Further discussion from council? Any follow-up from mayor or staff? Director Johnston.
One comment about the future study that I mentioned for 23-24 about these options that's alluded to in this third motion. That will require for us to issue a new request for qualifications, which could lead to a new consulting firm to do that work. So one of the concerns and questions has been out in the world is changing our list of consultants on this effort. With this change that we are making here and the proposed study that's alluded to in one of the studies in the third motion here, we will be issuing a new request for qualifications. We hire engineering firms under state law based on qualifications, and so that process will start anew in 2023. It might be Brown and Caldwell, it might be somebody else, it might be a different firm. So I just want to be clear that that type of work, that particular work, will not be done under an existing contract that we may have with Brown and Caldwell. It will be a new contract, potentially with a different firm.
Thank you, Director Johnston. Councilmember Martins.
Thank you. To get back to actually a nut and bolt of the presentation, Director Johnston, is there any way you can elaborate on projected emissions? Will it, according to the 2016 EPA requirements and our incinerator system being older than 2010, are we going to hit a threshold where the 50% improvement cost as relation to the original improvement will cause our current EPA guidelines to step up to the new fancy new addition model, or will we be grandfathered in for our previous emissions while we figure out the rest of the trajectory for the project?
We are expecting to have to replace or upgrade significantly the stack emissions and monitoring systems for air quality coming off of the incineration system. So the short answer is yes, but it's an immensely complex morass of regulations from the state and federal level that are difficult for even the regulators to understand as applies to this very narrow view of things. It is safe to say that we have significant investments to make into that, into those emission systems, both to meet the strict regulatory requirements and our own standards for redundancy and reliability in our protections of the air quality. The air quality permits that we do list out there, we are significantly below in terms of the regulated emissions, such as particulate matter. I have a table here in front of me. The EPA requirements limit us at 80 milligrams per cubic meter. I think that's what that unit is. And we're currently at 1.2 in one incinerator and 0.478 in the other. As one example, not all of them are that good, but as one example in terms of particulate matter, the standard is 80 and we're at 1.2 and 0.47 respectively. Now, as we make the changes, those limits from the regulations will come down. Comparing a fluidized bed, which has a lower level of a particulate matter, that standard under the EPA regulations is 18. We would still meet that under our current operating with the multi-hearth incinerators. So there's some nuances and it's very detailed and nuanced, and it's not worth getting into at this level of detail. But the expectation that we have is that we will need to make investments into those emissions and control systems for air pollution, both to meet EPA and Northwest Clean Air standards and for our own standards of redundancy and reliability.
And you don't need to pull out a chart or anything, but is that kind of assumed cost, slightly predicted cost factored into the numbers that we're looking at currently, or will that have to be assessed further down the road and we're not even thinking about those numbers yet?
Recall that in the council packet is the presentation from previously, and in that is a table of costs comparing the resource recovery project to our current model. There are two line items in that table. One is $100 million for investments into the solid system. That is a number. That's our best guess at this point in time. There's another $50 million number that is set aside as a future unknown. And that factors into our recommendation that we can proceed forward and move these things forward, can keep doing what we need to be doing. I would expect that those numbers would be hopefully on the high side, but don't hold me to that. But that's our expectation, is we'll be able to do what we need to do at that level of investment. What those numbers also account for is a future $200 million investment for nutrients. And that's the target that we really want to keep an eye on. We can afford to do what we're doing in terms of maintaining the system over a number of years based on our existing rate program that bases on CPI. What that is not planned for is that future need for nutrient removal in terms of physical infrastructure. And that's partly because now we don't know the timing as to when that would occur. With the digester project, that was triggered by 2027. Now that has been pushed off, we don't know when that date would be triggered. And more importantly, we don't know when ecology will go below our general permit for nutrients and assign to us an individual permit. So that is an unknown for us, which is why we'll spend some time in 2023 being prepared for that and looking at that and factoring that in. But that's, as this conversation about affordability, which is super important, we don't want to lose sight of the timing as to when ecology will trigger that into there. Now, Mayor Fleetwood and I have both spoken with the director of ecology, and our staff continue to have those conversations at a staff level. Ecology has expressed an awareness of those concerns. We would expect that their willingness to work with us will not come in terms of a check to support it, but understanding and working with us on timing as to when those requirements come into place, as they have done in the past, particularly with our stormwater permits, where the rules come out and over many, many years, as our capacity comes up to meet those permits, the requirements become more and more stringent over time. What this change does is it gives us more flexibility in terms of meeting those regulations.
And I know we're all kind of asking you to look into a crystal ball, but thank you for that answer and just being able to identify that, yeah, we're watching it. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Anderson?
Actually, my hand is up for after this vote because my question's not dependent on whether I vote to support or not. So maybe call on me after.
Yep. Any further discussion related to the motion before us at this time, which is the third motion, which was made by Councilmember Lillquist and seconded by Councilmember Williams, to move that the administration actively pursue and develop work plans investigating future projects into alternative waste solid technologies and processes, including but not limited to thermal processes such as pyrolysis and gasification, for supplementing and or replacing the current incineration equipment and processes. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I did have a question, and my apologies, Director Johnson, I didn't ask you this when we had met on Friday, but you had sent a screenshot of the control panel that showed the firing temperature on a particular day and time. And I believe it goes between 1200 and 1500 degrees. And I believe PFAS, the chain is broken down at about 1500. And given that there's the potential that PFAS could be in part of the, I don't want to say smoke or steam, but basically the exhaust, I'm wondering, can the current incinerators burn at that 1500 more consistently or even a higher temperature? Are we set up for that so that there would be the better possibility of being able to break down those PFAS chains before they go through the exhaust? Given that, and if you're not too sure, or we would have to take a look at it, it would be good to have that information in the future shared, because it is going to take us some time to get something else in line. And even though our goal is to reduce the amount of PFAS coming into the stream, the reality is they're there now. And it's going to take time legislatively to eliminate those products, let alone for the products that are in the consumer hands. It's going to take some time. So I'm just kind of wondering if there's that possibility that our current incinerators would be able to fire at a temperature that would be able to break down those chains so that we can lessen how much might be going up in the air.
That's a great question, and one that is being asked by the entire wastewater industry, because the answer is frankly an unknown. If we think about our physics, we think that higher temperatures are better at reducing things to their elemental atomic level, right? If I can go so far as to say that. What we don't know, and I think that this is a challenging thing, is we don't know how those things are changed through that incineration process. So with PFAs, there are more than 9,500 known existing PFA compounds, 9,500. And oftentimes the conversation about PFAS gets narrowed down to one particular type of compound and then broadcast to all the others. So it's a really challenging thing to be able to say affirmatively, we know of a certainty that at this temperature, at this time, at this type of process, that this resolves all of those types of compounds. So that's a great deal of uncertainty that's out there. That is the topic of a tremendous amount of research being conducted these days. Fortunately, the Department of Defense is heavily involved in that conversation right now. They recently this year decided to not use incineration as a means of destroying their firefighting foams, which contain PFAs. They did that not because it doesn't work, but because they don't know, as I understand what's being published about that. So I'm not sure that I can answer the question is, does it work or does it not work in that stark of a response? However, we can affirmatively clearly state that the best way to reduce our releasing PFAs into the environment is to stop them at the source. So the best way to eliminate PFAs in the wastewater stream is stop them coming down to begin with. Unfortunately, they are so ubiquitous in our society that that's almost impossible to do. But we are committed to contributing and participating in that. We are looking at a number of different things. We are engaging in a research study that's being put out by the EPA for PFAs and residuals that come from incineration and biosolids and other things. We will continue to participate and support financially those national research in organizations. The Water Environment Federation, WEFTEC, is one, or the WEF that leads to WEFTEC, that participates in that. We will continue to stay abreast of those nationwide trends. The incinerators, let's talk about that for just a minute. They are what we've called multi-hearth incinerators. and Steve Bradshaw is here, he's the plant operator, might tell me if I get this wrong, but of the 7 ovens in those incinerators, it goes through varying temperatures at different times. The peak is around 1400, 1500 degrees, but it varies throughout the system. So can we get it hotter? Probably not. Are we in that range of 1500 degrees? Most of the time we probably are. Pyrolysis and gasification tend to run at a lower temperature, but they are generally thought to be reducing or destroying PFAS compound, but that is still a question that's some uncertainty. So I'm all over the map here a little bit, but again, the short answer is we don't really know, but we're fully engaged in trying to find that answer out. It makes some sense that higher temperatures are better at reducing compounds to their constituents. What is uncertain is what those constituents are. Are they taken down to nitrogen and carbon and oxygen, or are they creating different types of compounds that might have equally adverse effects as the original compound itself?
Steve Bradshaw, did you want to add anything to what Director Johnson said?
No, he pretty well got it. The big thing I'd also keep in mind is we run the temps of the ovens off of our regulations. So we can't just raise temperatures without affecting other regulations down the line. So that'd be the only thing.
Great, thank you for that. Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you. And this is not a motion, just kind of a request or a suggestion. I think the heart of Bellingham is really strong environmental, and there are a lot of community members who are informing themselves and paying attention to the issue of PFAS. And we're going to, for a while, be reliant on the elimination of them from our bodily intake and the waste stream. But if there's at all possible, I know that the mayor has a newsletter that goes, well, there's a content in our, I think once or twice a year for our water bill. It might be nice to have an article that lists the common items that PFAS gets into our waste stream. I know for myself, when I learned Teflon pans, which I loved for a while, were an issue, I quit cooking with them and bought porcelain. And I think people would make consumer changes if they understood. And so if it's at all possible to put, the Dirty Dozen list of items to avoid and get that information into consumer hands through an already available channel. As much as I'd like to say the webpage is sufficient, it's self-selective that you have to go there. So I think something that would come in the billing, which is already being sent out, might be a really nice article to provide to help start that educational process with our community.
Thank you for that suggestion. We'll take that into account. Appreciate it, Councilmember Anderson.
Any further discussion on this item? Okay. Mayor Fleetwood.
First off, thank you for those motions. I appreciate it. Feels, among other things, just right to be in sync with all of you as policymakers for the city of Bellingham and in sync with administrative action. So I appreciate the motions today. I was going to bring this up tonight. I still will. But as we talk about so many things relating to Post Point and the future and needs, I think it's also important to remember that by all kinds of measures, it remains and has been an exceptional wastewater treatment plant. The state of Washington, the Department of Ecology, gave out an outstanding performance award that we received recently, an outstanding performance award for 2021. Washington State Department of Ecology recognizes the exemplary effort and work accomplished by the city of Bellingham and a dedicated team at the Post Point wastewater treatment plant. Thank you for protecting and keeping Washington's waters clean, from the Department of Ecology, Washington State. So anyway, just thought it seemed like an appropriate time to share that. again, I'll bring that to attention tonight in the mayor's report as well. That's all.
Thank you, Mayor Fleetwood. If there's nothing further on this item, we will move forward to the next agenda item that's before us this afternoon. And that's Agenda Bill 23391. So it's approval of city meeting minutes. This would be related to the committee meeting minutes for September 12th, 2022.
Move adoption.
I have two firsts, so I'll move one
One
you
of us
second.
got it.
Motion made by Councilmember
I'll be the
Hammond,
second.
by Councilmember Williams. Perfect. Any discussion or changes? Okay, seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes 7-0. Old and new business. Councilmember Hamel.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that last week there was a forum on public safety that was held at the Whatcom Museum, the old City Hall. And I know that several others were in attendance. Several other council members were in attendance, as well as the mayor, Prosecutor Ritchie, and many others. I found it pretty fascinating to listen to the state legislature folks and law enforcement, and listen to the concerns of downtown business owners and constituents. And I just wanted to thank the Downtown Bellingham Partnership for providing that service, that venue for discussion.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamel. Mayor Fleetwood. Was
Just
it
to
really-
follow up on that, as it relates to what Councilmember Hamel said, that presentation can be found on our city YouTube channel and BTV.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Because that was going to be one of my questions, somewhat related to that with public safety, is that I know in our consent agenda this evening, items 5 and 6. So item number 5 is Agenda Bill 23460, which is regarding the interlocal agreement for inmate housing. And number 6, Agenda Bill 23461 is interlocal jail facility use agreement with Whatcom County. And I know that those are fairly routine, routine things. That's why they're included in the consent agenda. And I don't know that they need to be formally pulled, but along the public safety, conversations and concerns that we've heard from the community, some of that centers around the jail, the feeling that there's lack of capacity, or that local law enforcement, when they need to arrest someone, that they're not allowed to do so. And so I just wanted, Chief Mertzig, whether, I didn't want to put you on the spot now, or if this evening you could speak to those just briefly, because I think it at least highlights the fact that the city, does what it can to sort of get creative, to allow local law enforcement to continue doing their job. So I don't know if, I realize that you're here, if you want to speak to that briefly. I don't know what the formal protocol is with respect to a consent item, but.
Yeah, these are just a continuation of what we already been doing. The SCORE agreement was already in place when I was here, but I kind of delayed on signing that until I knew what was going to happen with Snohomish County. And once that fell through, I felt like we had to have at least another option. So I'm going to continue that contract with SCORE.
Thank you for that, Chief Mertzig. Councilmember Martins.
Thank you. I attended my first Immigration Advisory Board meeting on Tuesday, and there's a lot of great work happening in there. But something that came up over and over again that I have no background on is that their July meeting was canceled. And there didn't seem to be any communication to the board or its members as to why. So I just wanted to throw it out in the ether with all these brilliant ears who are way more connected than I am as to why it's happening. Is there any way that we could just get a communication out to the Immigration Advisory Board as to why July was taken off of their, or sorry, not July, but August was taken off of their calendar? Please and thank you.
Certainly, Councilmember Martins. I'll be happy to follow up with you and also provide formal communication back to the board. So thank you for that. Councilmember Hamel.
Yeah, on the ILO, that the interlocal agreement, sorry for the abbreviation there, the interlocal agreement that's in the consent agenda, that's for $2.5 million. It does list Snohomish County Jail as an additional party, the correctional facility. I just looking for clarification on that. Is that a reference to SCORE, or is that a different reference? And I'm asking Chief Mertzig on that one.
Trying to start my video, but can you hear me? There we go.
Yep.
That might have just been an oversight on our part. They indicated they do want to potentially continue a relationship next year, but I don't think that was left in there intentionally. Because we don't have an agreement with them right now.
Councilmember Hamel, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. So does that need to be struck from that agenda bill item then? I don't know who to ask that question to, if that's a legal question. And then while that's getting sorted out, I just wanted to just bring this up so it's part of the public record, that there was a proposal to work with Snohomish County Jail for, I believe, an additional 45 beds. Because at this point we are, it's felons only in Whatcom County Jail. And it's pretty extreme cases, is my understanding. There was an incident last month at the post office where a person was wielding a knife, and Bellingham police officers had to, take that person into custody. And it was questionable whether or not that person was going to be held at the jail. And so rather than release that person on what's called PR, or personal recognizance, for a court date, they did end up detaining that individual. But it sure seems that if that's the level of crime that is, or alleged crime, I guess in this case, that's being committed, and it's still questionable whether or not that person is going to enter that and stay in that facility. It just, I don't know. It just seems a little bit backwards to me. So the following through of the Snohomish County contract, which didn't get signed, even it never got signed, is a little disheartening. And this is coming from the chair of the chair of the Behavioral Health Committee for the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force that I've served on for forever. So I do understand the benefits of not putting people in jail and having alternative diversion services, absolutely. But when it comes to the types of things that we're seeing, that we heard about at this, Councilmember Martins and Huffman were at this meeting, and maybe others were at this public meeting on public safety, it's alarming to me, and it's not safe for the people in our community. So I just want to put that out there, that we need to have a rethinking a bit on what it means for local incarceration and partnerships with other counties. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamel. Mayor Fleetwood, did you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy just to follow up generally on this. This inquiry into trying to address the booking restriction issue began in earnest last winter, when the booking restrictions were in place, and we recognized we needed some way to hold some people in our community and start arresting again, and knowing that people are not, with certain charges at least, are not going to be released. And that effort resulted in conversations with Prosecutor Ritchie and the sheriff, and there was a substantial effort made to try and work something out with Snohomish County, and we thought we were making progress in that regard. And we learned, for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with us, I think it's fair to say, some politics in Snohomish County, and I'm not judging it one way or the other, but that effort on our part, our substantial effort on our part in local government in Whatcom County, didn't work out. So I note that the agenda bill that's referenced in our packet is not for Snohomish County, it's for SCORE, South Correctional Entity, and there's efforts afoot as it relates to that. I think it's just not ready for prime time, and we'll make sure that it's pulled for this evening, unless unless anyone on staff is able to make a case that it should be in there, and they can nuance it accordingly. But I believe we'll just pull it tonight. We continue to make effort to try and find another facility with whom we can contract to address our issues in the short term before a jail is built. And clearly that's some years out. So we'll keep working on it.
Thank you, Mayor Fleetwood. Councilmember Williams?
Yeah, first of all, this Snohomish County situation maybe, and maybe Chief Mertzik could lend some clarity to it, but I heard in some meetings that I went to that maybe part of the reason why this didn't work is because the lack of staffing they have in dealing with their own element down there, and they just didn't have the capacity to accept ours as well. But the other piece, I was at the meeting last week as well, but the one thing that I think, if now some of the more experienced council members have probably already done this, but if you want to see why we need a new facility, take a tour of the current facility, because it is way under par. And you walk through there and you can see that for a facility that was built in when 1982 or something, is totally inadequate for the needs we have today. And so whoever's working on the new facility, I hope that when it comes out in terms of the overall plan, that the eye is given to what we need to provide people to not only be incarcerated, but after that phase is over, something that will move them towards stability and so forth when they leave. Because walking through our facility, it was horrible. It was just horrible. And if you haven't seen it, you need to. So all that being said, we have our challenges and we need to keep moving forward. But I was totally blown away by just seeing that facility that we have right now.
Councilmember Williams, did you have another comment or item for old and new? No, okay. Thank you for that. I also just wanted to highlight for members of the community that the town hall that was held this past Monday, which was September 19th, centered around community voices on funding priorities, and just wanted the public to know that the recording of that event is available through our meetings website online. So for members who weren't able to attend but would like to see the content of that town hall, that is available through the meetings website. Mayor Fleetwood?
I just hand it over to Brian Heinrich, who can just use this opportunity to underscore the dates for budget work sessions with council.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We wanted to propose to council that we would begin our budget work session starting on the afternoon of October 10th and continue those. So every Monday through the month of October, including the scheduled council day on the 24th, and ideally wrapping up at the November 7th meeting. So this is similar to what we've done in years past, meeting in the mayor's boardroom, and then having department heads present their budget to you. And so that's the proposal, is to begin on the 10th. We'll introduce the budget, as you know, on the 3rd, next Monday, but meet the 10th and 17th, perhaps at 1 o'clock or at a time of council's choosing. And then on the 31st as well, with regular work or budget work session on the regular Mondays. on the 24th and 7th.
Okay, so just to clarify, in October, our next meetings, the third presentation of the budget, and then you said work sessions on the 10th, 17th, and the 31st, since we have a regular meeting on the 24th. So skipping that regular meeting day.
We would also propose that we adjourn to the mayor's boardroom following your regularly scheduled work to have a budget work session on the 24th as well. So really just asking if we can meet on the 10th, 17th, and 31st, the non-regular council meeting days.
In addition, okay. And at this time, there are no dates for November.
Just the regularly scheduled November 7th meeting.
Okay. And with respect to timing, yeah, I would propose the 1:00 p.m. sort of when we typically hold afternoon sessions, but this would be on the off Mondays, but that's open to discussion and availability requests from other council members as well. Mr. Erb, was your hand related to this item or the previous item? Or a future item?
Related to the previous item.
Oh.
I'd heard Councilmember Hamel ask a question about what to do with this item. And I trust anyone to correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is listed as item 5 on the consent agenda. It was placed there as a non-controversial extension of the interlocal agreement between the city of Bellingham and SCORE for overflow inmate housing. And so the police department had placed it on consent agenda, thinking it could just be moved forward for 2023. If council would prefer not to have it on consent agenda and approve it as part of that this evening, I think it would be appropriate to have a motion, a second, and have it pulled from consent agenda and maybe referred to the appropriate committee for additional discussion. I'm not sure what that discussion would entail, but it seems that that's where that particular item falls. I see Mr. Heinrich has his hand up.
Well, I wondered if Councilmember Hamel could restate his concerns because, yeah, I mean, I think from the administration's perspective, and I see Chief Mertzig here as well, that this is an extension of an existing contract that we've had in place, which dates, oh gosh, several years back. It allows us, in some ways, it's a bit of a safety valve for us when we have someone that we would like to transport. There's obviously a staffing impact when we do that, but again, we've had a contract with SCORE for a number of years.
So I was whether to go to Chief Mertzig first or to Councilmember Hamel to clarify the request or potential discrepancy that he'd seen. I'll go to Councilmember Hamel first.
Thank you. I was just a little bit confused as to which facility it was referring to, since it referred to Snohomish County Correctional Facility. I took that to mean SCORE, but I just wanted to clarify because of the recent deal that fell through with Snohomish and Whatcom County, which we would have been a party to. I just wanted to clarify what we were voting on for that consent agenda item. That's all.
Chief Mertzig.
Yeah, so there's 2 on there, the SCORE one, which we've already talked about, but the second one is the interlocal with the jail itself. On page 280 of the packet, it talks about adding Snohomish County Jail as a correctional facility to utilize in the event of overflow at the Whatcom County Jail. I think we just left that language in there should that door open next year, but that's tied to the interlocal with the jail itself and not SCORE. SCORE is a separate thing. I don't think there's anything controversial on that one.
I don't have any objection to that. If it's just a matter of housekeeping, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think we're good to go forward as planned with the consent agenda. So thank you for the clarification. So looping back to Mayor Fleetwood and Mr. Heinrich's discussion of the budget work sessions for October. any objections or other recommendations with respect to time for those off Mondays in October? So I'm proposing 1:00 PM unless there are other requests.
I guess the only thing we should consider is what the customs have been in years past. If we think that, if the finance team thinks that and the department heads giving presentations think that the afternoon hour is sufficient, then it's sufficient. If they perceive that more time is needed, then we would notify you. So perhaps we should go forward with 1 PM penciled in as the assumed time. And if we see a date that requires more, we'll consult with you, Council President Stone, and propose a morning start.
Okay.
And I'll send out the departments that we are scheduling for those dates. And to the mayor's point, if we go long or need to hold over a department, we have flexibility to do that.
That sounds good. I just wanted to make sure we have a time set for publication and notice of those additional public meetings. So if there is, as soon as we know if there's a change, just to correspond with the council office, and we'll make those changes. But otherwise, at this time, we'll go forward with a 1:00 afternoon start time. Okay. Thank you for that. Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you. Since I tend to have a full-time day job and was scheduled to work my job during those Mondays, I would appreciate having an idea, like, is it going to go 1 to 5? Is it 1 to 3? I need to kind of scramble and see if I could get coverage. And then if for some reason it does need to expand, I'd really appreciate some advance notice if we needed to switch it to the morning. I'm flexible, but not without other obligations that I need to be very mindful to.
It's a good question. We're trying to not overwhelm those afternoons with more than, say, 2 or 3 departments at a time. Of course, the complexity of the budget changes depending on that department as well, the nature of the work or the size of their budget. But generally speaking, I would think 1 to, say, 3:00 at the most, and we can endeavor to stick to a schedule like that if council would like. And then, like I said, we have built in some flexibility in the schedule. So if we agree that 3:00, generally speaking, is when we should adjourn, whatever is left uncovered, we can bring back at the next meeting or move it to one of the open November Mondays. So I think there's flexibility if that would help folks with their scheduling. Certainly the department head team is happy to accommodate council. We know it's an additive meeting to your list. So we're certainly flexible.
For me, it would be very helpful to have a pretty solid set time. If we ended at 3, that at least would allow me to get back to work. So my coworker can leave to go get their kids as planned, because it's a cascading effect on my end when I disrupt my coworker's schedule. And I'd like to give them as much heads up if they have to arrange daycare.
And I would also propose, obviously less than ideal, but that even in the mayor's boardroom, I believe we do have the ability for remote attendance by members of the council if things got into a pinch. But yeah, ideally you could be there with us in person. So
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So tentatively 1 to 3. And then we'll go from there and see how things go. Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Yep. Any other items for old and new business? Okay. There will be another opportunity this evening if there are any that arise. Going forward this afternoon, we do have executive session and we have 3 items before us. So the first is a potential property acquisition. This will be with Herb for approximately 5 minutes. The second item is also a potential property acquisition with Herb for approximately 5 minutes. And then the third and final item is another potential property acquisition, but this one is with Sundin for approximately 10 minutes. So the invite to that executive session was sent out this morning by Mr. Erb. So that should have been received by council members in your email inbox. And if there are no further items for consideration at this time, we will adjourn to executive session, but we will reconvene this evening at 7:00 p.m. So if there's nothing further, we are adjourned. We'll see you soon. Thank you.